to the Borderlands.
Hi everyone, welcome to Smack Reviews. If you love our honest reviews, smack that subscribe button so you never miss out. Movies and shows that revolve around games, especially death games, are a pretty niche genre, and there aren't too many popular examples of it out there. If you ask someone what their favorite series is in that category, they might say Hunger Games or maybe even Squid Games. But for me personally, my favorite has always been Alice in Borderland. Even though Alice in Borderland first came out in 2020, it didn't get the global attention it truly deserved at first. It already had a strong following in Japan, especially since it was based on a popular manga. In fact, it was thanks to its strong Japanese viewership, where it ranked among the top shows on Netflix Japan, that the series was able to secure a second season, and eventually a third season that was released just recently. And now that we're at season 3, which is presumably the end of Arisu and Usagi's story, I have to be honest, I always wonder if this new season was even necessary. Season 2 wrapped up things in a way that felt complete, so going into the third season, I couldn't help but question how they would even justify returning to the Borderlands. But within the beginning of season 3, I thought it had a solid start. The most important thing to take away from the first 2 seasons is that the Borderlands itself was essentially a type of limbo, a place people go when they're teetering between life and death. If you manage to beat the games and survive for long enough, you could eventually wake up back in the real world, but if you die in the Borderlands, you of course won't wake up. Arisu and Usagi and many others chose to return to the real world while others chose to stay. Once back in the real world, all those people seemingly had no memory of knowing each other and no memory of the games either.
So Season 3 introduces a new character, an assistant professor named Ryuji, who's a handicapped man obsessed with death, who has been collecting testimonies including from Arisu and Usagi to prove the existence of a mysterious world filled with deadly games. His obsession with finding and entering this world leads him to meeting one of the citizens of the Borderlands, Banda, that chose to stay behind at the end of Season 2. Somehow Banda is able to cross between the real world and the Borderland. It's never explained how or why he can do this, which I really wish they had gone into, but it is what it is. In short, Banda seems to miss the strong players who left the Borderlands, especially Arisu. He wants him to come back. Arisu of course doesn't want anything to do with returning, so Banda has Ryuji trick Usagi into going back into the Borderlands with him. Naturally, Arisu ends up returning as well, and the goal becomes bringing Usagi back to the real world. One detail that really bothered me this season was how Banda wanted the strong players to return to the Borderlands, but he didn't even bother trying to bring back others like Chishiya, Kuina, Aguni, or a few of the other standouts. I get that this was probably due to budgeting reasons or conflicting schedules, but still, it felt like a missed opportunity. Personally, I really wish we had gotten to see more of Chishiya this season. He was easily my favorite character in the entire show, so it was disappointing that he didn't have a major role this time around. From there, the rest of the season plays out through two perspectives: Arisu and his new group of players trying to survive the games, and Usagi and Ryuji playing through their own sets of challenges, while also meeting new allies along the way. The story plays out like this until near the end, when Arisu and Usagi finally reunite for the final game. As expected, Arisu manages to save Usagi, and the two of them return to the real world to live happily ever after. And it's safe to assume that their time on this show is officially over. But then we get a little tease at the end, kind of like what Squid Game did, hinting that there could eventually be a spin-off or a direct continuation, possibly taking place in the United States. If that does end up happening, I wouldn't be entirely against it. In fact, I think it could be really cool because this universe is genuinely interesting. I just wish that this third season had focused more on exploring the Borderlands itself, like who or what's actually in charge of it, if anyone even is. Why does it exist in the first place? How are citizens like Bond able to move between the real world and the Borderlands? To me, answering those questions would have completely justified making this season. The first 2 seasons did a great job unraveling some of the mysteries behind the Borderlands, but they never went quite far enough. Season 3 felt like perfect opportunity to dive deeper into those questions, but it never really did, at least not as much as I would have liked. Instead, all we really got was Arisu and Usagi briefly regaining their memories of the Borderlands while they were there, only to lose them again once they returned to the real world. So in the end, it's not like they grew any closer or learned anything new that stuck with them. It's basically like none of it ever happened. And from that perspective, I can't help but wonder why even make this season in the first place.
As far as the games go this season, I do think most of them were entertaining to watch. The creativity and tension were still there for the most part. I will say though, the final game wasn't as exciting as I would have liked it to be, but that's whatever. Out of all the games, the one I enjoyed the most was the zombie game. I love the idea behind it because technically no one had to die. If everyone had agreed to let themselves become zombies, they all could have made it out alive. But of course, irrational thinking and fear took over. And that's what made it so good to watch. It really reminded me of the solitary confinement game from season 2, where trust was the main theme. And just like before, once that trust starts to crumble, everything just falls apart fast. I also thought the first game of the season, the Sacred Fortunes game, was really interesting since that was actually the very first game featured in the manga. Seeing it brought to life in live action was pretty cool. In short, I had fun watching all the games play out this season. I just wish the final one had been a little different because personally, I just wasn't the biggest fan of it.
So as for the rest of the cast, especially with all the new characters we meet along the way, they were fine, but honestly I didn't feel much attachment to most of them. With this third season only having 6 episodes compared to the previous season's 8, there just wasn't enough time to really connect with these new faces, so when characters started dying off, I didn't really feel anything beyond the occasional shock value. The only death that actually hit me a little was Kazuya. He was a part of Arisu's team. Of all the side characters this season, I liked him the most and I really wished he'd made it further, but unfortunately that wasn't the case. Now when it comes to Ryuji's character, I thought he was interesting conceptually, but a lot of the things he was physically capable of felt a little ridiculous. Despite him being in a wheelchair, he somehow manages to swing and launch himself across moving subway cars using just his arms. He keeps his head above water in a whirlpool while holding onto an usagi, and even survive a game involving high-speed lasers in a tunnel that they had to dodge to stay alive. I get that they emphasize his upper body strength early on, but still, it stretched believability even for Alice in Borderland standards of ridiculousness. But honestly, I just wish Arisu and Usagi had spent more time together this season instead of splitting them up for so long. Their chemistry has always been the heart of the show, and pairing Usagi with Ryuji for most of the season really took away from that dynamic, in my opinion.
When it comes to season 3 overall, and the show as a whole, I do believe that Alice in Borderland is absolutely worth watching all the way through. Despite its flaws, like some uneven pacing, questionable plot choices, and characters that didn't get enough time to shine, it still delivers an exciting and often unpredictable experience that stands out in the death game genre. Even though season 3 didn't end as strongly as I had hoped, I still think the journey as a whole was worth it, and the reason I love this very niche genre of death games is when witnessing the games play out and learning the rules you can figure out along with the characters. If there's anything you can think of that will help the players give them some type of advantage, and it's satisfying. Make sure to like, share, comment, and please subscribe. Bye!